Now, I've never really understood what the foundation does.
Okay.
What you do.
Okay. You want me to tell you that? You want
Yes,
this to be
please.
part of the thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I never sent you a letter of congratulations either when you got that position.
Oh, well, that's okay. I've held it against you.
I know you have.
So that's some more kneeling you need to go do in that chapel. So the Methodist Foundation was started in 1963. And really it was a way to help churches that were getting estate gifts. And so Mrs. Smith dies and she leaves her house that's worth $100,000 to First United Methodist Church, Jonesboro. And so enough of those have taken place now that we have over 800 accounts of things just like that. So First United Methodist Church Little Rock has been benefactors of people who have left gifts. And they're not all, homes. It could be people who've just left outright gifts from their wills, or and it also could be someone who's alive now, and they would take out what's called a gift annuity. So they would give money to the foundation. And a great example of this is someone's reached retirement and they're used to a certain level of income, and they have stock that doesn't give any dividends. It's growing, but it doesn't ever give dividends. Or they've got land, let's say, and they may or may not have children, but they know when they die they're going to give $200,000 to their church. So, but they also now have retired and they need a little more income. So one option is they could give, let's say if it's Walmart stock, they could go ahead and give that to the foundation. Let's say it's worth $100,000. We sell it, turn that into an account. They immediately get tax benefits, not the full $100,000, but depending on their tax bracket and all that. But they could get, like they've given $75,000 in charitable gifts, so they would get that as an immediate tax, which is huge. And you can spread that out over so many years. Okay, so that's benefit number one. Benefit number two, that $100,000 is going to get invested, and depending on their age, they're going to get a percentage of that every month or every quarter or every year. And so some people literally that supplements their income. That's benefit number two, is you actually get money, you get a tax credit. And then the third benefit is when they do die, they've already said this money is going to First Methodist Church Little Rock, and I want it to support the youth program. Done. And so, they got their tax credit, they've lived another 25 years, and they've gotten income for the rest of their life. It doesn't ever go away. And so then that becomes an account that would benefit this church. So imagine that's been going on for almost 60 years, both individuals and, then the other thing that churches do is, let's say that it wasn't an estate gift. Let's say that they just happen to have an extra $25,000 and it's in a CD. They may open an account with us, and again, it'll earn, and we would just send the earnings back to the church. And so that's a lot of what we're doing. And a lot of what my job is helping churches and individuals see how they can benefit their local church, either now or through these legacy gifts. And but the other part of my job, which is even more fun, and I find what I'm doing is a lot of fun, is the grants that we actually give. So we actually give money away. And in the almost 60 years history, some people, instead of leaving it to First Methodist Church Little Rock, they've said, okay, we want to give the money to the foundation, and we want the foundation to use that in ways they think is best to help ministry in Arkansas. Okay? So that has given us a huge bulk of money that we actually send students to seminary. We give money to Hendricks and Philander, both for capital programs. The Creative Quad and the Welcome Center in Hendricks both got gifts from the foundation to help build those buildings. Philander Smith, we gave money to help build their latest dorms. But we've also given money like to the chaplains departments and, food ministry, churches who are doing food pantries, leadership programs. But we gave away $1.5 million last year. So it's a big
noticeable chunk of change.
It is. That's on top of the $5 million that was returned to churches and institutions for those kind of accounts that I just explained earlier. The Mrs. Smith, who died 20 years ago and left what was then $100,000, but it's now grown and doubled. But that church is going to get money forever and ever and ever because of that. So that's what we do, and we do leadership development for clergy and lay people, and so we, try to think of ways to help the church.
Well, I never realized that's what it did.
Yeah, and honestly, there many even ministers don't quite. The ministers just know we have a lot of money. We deal with a lot of money, and we do. We're the sixth largest. There's 51 foundations in the country, Methodist foundations, and we're the sixth largest in the country.
That's noteworthy.
It's very we're managing about $240 million, and half of that is what we would call it's owned by the churches. Mm-hmm. So they have full, we don't want this to happen, but they could say to us, we want our money back. That's the kind of account that someone just says, we want you to manage our money, the church, okay? But the other half of that 240-ish million is owned by the foundation, and that's those monies that people have given the foundation, said, y'all do ministries that way. So, but it's, like I said, it's trying to help churches realize the benefits. And I'm probably going way more in detail this, but so think of us as the religious version of Merrill Lynch or Edward Jones, okay? We provide the exact same services as they do. But here's the big difference, and this is what I try to sell churches on, is we have fees, just like Edward Jones or Merrill Lynch or whatever stockbroker. Our fees are a lot less, and we won't get into all that. But, the Edward Jones folks, those fees are going back in the pockets of shareholders and, bonuses for staff and all that kind of stuff. Our fees, obviously, they pay for operations, but our extra fees are going to do more ministry and grants and things like that. So of that $1.5 million, probably a couple of $100,000 of that was extras in fees that we had that we just wanted to, that we wanted to give instead of it going as a bonus to stockholders, because we don't have stockholders, that kind of thing. So helping the church realize that. In fact, I'm going this Sunday to a church, and here's the other thing I've learned is it doesn't need to be a First Little Rock or a Pulaski Heights. The church I'm going to, I won't give you too much, they worship less than 15 people. Okay?
That's not a lot.
Not a lot. 10 years ago, someone died and left them just under $1 million. They've taken that $1 million. It's in like an Edward Jones. I'm not sure where it is, but it's in a place already. It's grown to $1.7 million. The minister wants me to come down there because he really thinks it needs to be with the Methodist Foundation. It's a Methodist church instead of. So I'll help them understand. Yeah, we get fees, but your money would also be helping with food pantries and helping go send ministers to seminary and things like that. And so we'll see. So that's kind of my part of what I get to do. And then the next week I may meet with my grant committee and we look at who we want to give money away to. So,
That's pretty cool.
yeah,
How'd you get from Hendrix to there, though?
that's a really good question. Well, even how did I get to Hendrix? So, as chaplain, I went to Hendrix as undergrad and went there to be a doctor. And after my first biology class with Dr. Joe Lombardi, did you ever have
heard
him?
that name. I didn't have
Yeah,
it.
he has since retired a couple of years ago. We realized that I didn't have the talent or the persistence to do that kind of work. So I had been real involved in the church in my youth group. I was conference president and, all that kind of stuff. But I just thought I'd always just be active in the church. But I kind of felt a call. And so I went to seminary, went to SMU after I graduated at Hendrix, and just thought I'd come back and be a preacher in the church for the rest of my life. And so I went to Magnolia was my first appointment. I was associate at First Methodist Magnolia, and then I went to a medium-sized church in Pine Bluff. And then the chaplain's job at Hendrix opened up. And I just felt this tug, like, Hendrix was so meaningful to me. It was life-changing for me. The chaplain at the time, John Guthrie, was very helpful in my vocational discernment. Maybe I could, So I applied and, after some series of things that didn't quite work out, but eventually it worked out. And so I went in 96 to be the chaplain. And, moving from being the pastor of a church to a chaplain, again, I had to learn because I didn't take how to be a chaplain in seminary. They didn't teach that kind of stuff, but you have to learn how to apply those kind of things. So I did it. I loved it. I did it for about 20 years. And then President Bill Tsutsui and Ellis Arnold approached me about being the associate vice president for development, which meant being the fundraiser. And I said, I don't know anything about fundraising. And they said, yeah, you do. And I said, no, I don't. But they helped me realize that in that almost 20 years of chaplaincy stuff, I had done fundraising. I'd applied for grants from the Eli Lilly Foundation and got money that you may have benefited from. Probably, I think I applied for about 4 or 5 different grants in my time there and got about $5 million of grants. And so I learned that, but for me, this may sound bad, it was very selfish. Like I'm wanting money for the chaplain's office because, Hendrix gave a budget for me to work with, but it's like, I want to do cool things. I want to do mission trips on a whole different level. We were doing them and, a student would pay $1,000 to go down to Haiti, and if the student had means to pay $1,000, they could go. But not every that meant a lot of students couldn't go on a mission trip, or you might pay $300 or $400 to go to Dallas for the weekend. And it's kind of like, well, so I wanted some money to make it affordable for all students to be able to go. So that was, and to do a few other things. So anyway, I had done that, and then the presidents along the way would, they might have a donor who was real interested in religious life, and they might say, would you come meet with me with this person and let them know what's going on? Well, because of that, I started developing relationships with donors, which for me, I wasn't doing fundraising. I was just hanging out with church people and telling them what was going on at Hendrix and as far as religious life. So anyway, when I was asked, they kind of pointed those things out to me, and I thought, oh, well, but it took about 9 months to convince me to do that. And so anyway, I did the development work, and it was, honestly, it was harder going from chaplain to being that development person than it was going from the local church to being chaplain. Because development was, I wasn't preaching on a regular basis. I wasn't doing your typical things that a minister does, and so there was some, not self-identity crisis, but it was like, is this really ministry? And But I soon realized that the people I was talking with, yeah, it's ministry because they're talking about these big life questions. What am I going? Has my life meant anything? You know, what I've got money I'd like to do something with. How can I do that? I want to be, I want to be remembered. So you're sitting there talking about these deep spiritual things that are really connected with their money and how they want to, what their legacy is going to be. So I realized, yeah, it is a ministry even in fundraising. So I thought I was done. I mean, I thought I would be retiring from Hendricks, and then Jim Argue, who was the president, died tragically, and that is the only reason I'm where I am and doing what I'm doing. After he died, almost like the call to go to the chaplain's office, I just kind of felt this tug, like, and it's like this big circle that's finally become a full circle. It's like, oh, I've kind of done these pieces, and because I'm still working with Hendricks in the chaplain's office and helping them think about grants and how to do ministry and stuff like that. So, and now I'm working back with local churches, helping them do things, and so I feel like I've got the best thing. But it's all been learn as I go.
Yeah. Do you ever miss campus life though?
There are parts of it I miss. What I really miss is just the campus, just walking around that great campus and just the interaction that I would have with people, even if I didn't know them. You might just say hi and you kind of knew people casually. And I went from Hendricks with all those buildings and all those people and all that to a brand new, gorgeous building out in West Little Rock with 8 people there, one building, which is great, and it's great space, but that was hard. And, but yeah, so there's parts of it, but I even when we, and I'm married, and I have 2 children, and my wife and I have said that we're the kind of, thank goodness, we're the kind of people that can be happy pretty much wherever we are. I mean, there's always going to be challenging situations, but we didn't ever feel like we were always trying to get to the grass is greener on the other side kind of thing. So I found my place where I am now and love it.
Well, it's a fascinating bit of knowledge I didn't know.
Yeah. Who knows? You might work at the foundation one day.
We'll see. Have you always been in Arkansas? Because I'm not from Arkansas. We grew up way in the north for the first 10 years. So we've worked our way into the Methodist Society
Here in Arkansas. I pretty much. I mean, I was born in Dallas, but when I was 5, we moved back to Arkansas. I lived in Hot Springs for 1 year, moved to Malvern, and started first grade in Malvern, and I graduated from Malvern. So pretty much, yeah, I'm from Arkansas. Although I still prefer barbecue that is Texas style barbecue, beef and no slaw. So yeah, grew up around Hot Springs and all that good stuff.
Very good. What else do we want to talk about? I would say that you were an important figure at my time at Hendricks. I don't know that you've shaped what I've done afterwards.
Hopefully the only the positive things.
But was there a kind of a key figure for you?
Yeah. Ministers would probably, obviously what I'm doing now would be kind of the big key figures. My minister in high school, who's still alive, his name's Gladwin Cannell, is the one who said, I'm going to take you to look at Hendricks. And I really didn't even know of Hendricks. And that was the only place I applied. And I was not the best student. I enjoyed the social life of school, even from first grade on. I enjoyed just, you know, but I did get into Hendrix, but I had to really work hard to stay there and things like that. But Gladwin was a big influencer in me getting to Hendrix, which again that kind of changed my life. It's where I met my wife, who's been a huge supporter in what I do as well. And but you know, my youth minister is the one who really encouraged me even to run for like the district president, and then that ended up me becoming the conference president at some, you know, by my senior year. So he, you know, people, and that's what I've tried to seek out in anybody, that everybody's got talents and gifts. You know, it's just figuring out what those are. You know, so hopefully I've done that a little bit with a few people to help them think about what they might can do. Because I certainly had that for me, you know. I think people who believe in you or see things in you that you obviously can't see at the time. You know, you say, have you thought about doing this, or you should go do this, or things like that. So, yeah.
How do you think that the church has changed over the last 20 years?
20 years?
10 years?
Yeah. A lot of change.
And I know that's kind of an interesting question because you haven't been directly in the church.
Yeah. And, you know, change, I think, is relative to, I think, in whatever you do, when you see it from the outside versus seeing the inside of it, seeing the workings, seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak, it's the same thing, but you have a different perspective of it. You know, so I had this image of the church, you know, in high school and even in college, but then when I become part of the system, you know, so I have to step back in that bigger picture. You know, did the church really change, or is it I've just seen different sides of the church? And I think it's really, the church didn't change. You just are starting to see, you know, you go work for a company that you know, think is the best company, and you realize, oh, it's got its flaws and it's got issues and things like that. So I think, I mean, obviously in the last decade, the church is certainly struggling with the newest, and I call it the newest contemporary issue of gender and sexuality. But when you look back at our history, and I taught Methodist history at Hendrix for a few years, and I lived in, and I'll tell you this if you want, but I lived and served two Methodist churches in England, about 4 hours north of London. So I got real interested in Methodist history and England and John Wesley and all of that came together. And so in teaching Methodist history, part of it is teaching about all the splits and the divisions in the denomination. In our history, there's been a lot of splits. I mean, the Civil War was obviously really kind of the only really big split, but there have been other splits, whether they've been about theology or whether women should be ordained or not be ordained, how bishops should be ordained, should they be ordained for life or just temporarily, alcohol, tobacco, even issues like there was a branch that broke off called the Free Methodist. Part of why they broke off was because they didn't think people should be paying a pew tax, because there was a time in our history that you actually paid a fee or a tax for your pew to sit in. And I will just tell you a fun little story. In one of my churches in England, I was in England in 88 and 89. And there was a lady in my church who was probably 75 at the time. So you can do the math at how long ago that was. She remembers as a child, not too young of a child, but like probably 10, her parents giving her whatever money they were paying for their pew tax, and she'd take it to the church. So it's not that long of history relatively. And in fact, I've got a picture of this church, and it's kind of like a blueprint of the church. So you've got the pews and the balcony, and then there are little pegs all on this wooden plaque that hangs on the board. And basically, when your family paid your tax for the month, I don't know if it was monthly or what, then you got your peg stuck in there to show that the Smith family has paid their pew tax for the month. So all that's to say is we had churches breaking off because they didn't feel like that was appropriate. So we've had, if you looked at a diagram of our splits, there would be times that this one line might have 2 or 3, and then 2 or 3 off of each of those. It's like a tree that has just splintered. And then it comes back together, In 1968 is when we came back to become the United Methodist Church. We were the Methodist Church prior to that. And for me, that says, yeah, we're going to split. The denomination is going to go through another split. Hopefully in y'all's lifetime, maybe in my lifetime, you draw that line further out, we're going to see these splits, but I feel confident that there's going many of those are going to come back together, just like after the Civil War and people started coming back together. We've done it before, we'll do it again. So, but for me, the core of who Methodism is, who John Wesley, what he was trying to do, hasn't gone away. Trying to help the underprivileged, and talking about grace, and that our salvation is free and you don't have to earn it, and all those kind of things. We're very social minded. So
it certainly is a challenging time.
It is,
especially given this pandemic that has accelerated some of these trends and changes.
Yeah.
Whether it's the declining number of people coming each week, because you can never really tell how many are watching online.
Right. Right. We're certainly at one of these major points, I think, that historians will look back and go, yeah, this was a key turning point, whatever we're turning to, even if it's the new way of going to church, because I don't think we'll be like we were before the pandemic, the Zooming, people watching. I mean, you've had, big churches. You had TV churches and TV ministers, that's been around for a while. But churches, even like this church, which is a big church, wasn't really doing TV church or doing, and certainly not a small little church. Well, now you've got, pastors that might have had 50 in worship. They might have 40 from now on, but they've got 35 or 40 who stream every Sunday, and they may live all over the country or some in, like Martha. Martha told me that she's not going to join a church in Kentucky. Why should she? Because they're doing by Zoom, so she might as well just stay connected here at this church. So it's a new day in some ways. So
to be able to connect across those different states, because my grandparents are watching.
Yeah,
they're in North Carolina.
Really,
and they have a friend of theirs who's watching. So we're connecting with a whole different group of people we wouldn't have before.
Well, and going back to England, I've watched my church that I was pastor of. There's a little bitty church in a little bitty village in northern England who is now streaming, and I can watch those services. I mean, who would have ever thought that kind of thing? So,
and it's certainly not something that I expected would stay with us through the pandemic.
Right.
We all expected it to return to some normal quicker than it has.
Right. But I don't want us to be so technology and so streaming. we can't lose that human interaction. And, I think I think we're going to have to be really conscientious about that.
Well, that's what I missed, was that seeing the people week in, week out, interacting with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I've even seen, this will truly show my age and the generation here, but I was watching some comedy show last night, or just a sitcom, and it was an older person like me who was made some comment that says, "Oh, let me just call them on the cell phone," and then younger people behind says, "What is it with old people who want to talk on the phone instead of texting?" And I get that. I mean, my children are like that. They'd much rather do that. But for me, even that is kind of, we got to be careful that we, don't lose where we can just sit down and have a conversation with people. When I had younger development officers, they would try to get an appointment to go see somebody, an alum or something like that, and they'd email and not get a response, or they might text and they come in and frustrated and they say, "I just can't." I said, "Have you called them on the phone?" "No." "Well, why don't you try calling them?" They'd come back, an hour later. "Hey, I've got an appointment with them." I'm go, "Oh, wow.
Amazing.
It's amazing." But you got to try all those sources, but there is something about human interaction too. So.
I guess given this difficult time, and it's, for some people, it goes back before this. They're just their personalities or whatever. But has there ever been a time, whether in this pandemic or in your time at Hendricks or in churches in England, Arkansas, wherever, where you were really challenged in your faith, where you thought, "Oh, gosh"?
Good question. Well, yeah, I'll start kind of the beginning and even up to now, when, I did the whole discerning my call and go to seminary, and you do all the training, and then, my first appointment, it's like, I'm a real minister, and, does that mean I can't do certain things or say certain things? Or, if I'm in the barber shop and someone tells a bad joke, can I not laugh at it? And, it was really kind of a struggle. And thank goodness I've realized that you have to grow into this identity of who you are. And so that was kind of a struggle of, not struggle, but it was like, gosh, this is real, And I soon realized, like, I think with any profession, you can still be yourself. You just got to figure out that balance of everything. So, I mean, that wasn't a struggle in my faith. I guess that was more of a struggle in my vocation, growing into my vocation. I guess faith-wise, you may not know this about me either. I was a hospital chaplain for my internship in seminary, and you only had to do 6 months of internship, and I decided I didn't want to do that in the local church, because in high school, I actually worked at a local church, and I was the liturgist every Sunday, and during the week I cleaned toilets. So I was the janitor and I was the liturgist at this church, and so I thought, for seminary, I wanted to do something different for my internship. So I wanted to see what hospital chaplaincy was. And so I worked at Children's Medical Center at Dallas. You only had to do 6 months, but I ended up doing 18 months because I loved it. It just was I loved it. And people would say, "How do you do it with children?" But my services I worked with were all the children that had cancer. And, but it was incredibly rewarding. I grew professionally and personally and emotionally and spirit, all those kind of ways. But certainly that was challenging on my faith when a child died. Didn't see it often, and didn't deal with it, but just struggling with how this loving God, and then you got this child who's died, and how to deal with all that. So but it helped me in the long run. It helped me grow, and it helped me understand, and helped me deal with tragedies, even in my ministries in the local church and things like that. And and now with our current crisis, I grieve, and I've kind of have equated it like the grief process. There's depends on who you read to talk about grief, but the classic ones are the 5 stages of grief. Where you deny it, and you get angry, and then you finally accept it, and that's kind of how I saw myself with this crisis. And even working with our staff at the foundation, I could tell they were going through different stages of that. No, we're not going to split, and well, dang it, if we're going to split, then this side, you get angry, and but I still grieve, and I think that grief is still there of that we're there. But I think I finally have accepted that it's best for us to go ahead and have this division, let the sides get strong in whatever they are, and then, like I said, hopefully in the end they'll be coming back together. Because you couldn't have told me, or you couldn't have told anyone 10 years after the Civil War was over that those churches would have ever come back together, North and South, But they did, and I'm sure there are people now who, whichever side you are on the issue, who will say, I will never go to church with a gay person, or I'll never go to church with someone who's gay friendly, but they will, so.
It'll become more normalized for
Yeah.
them, and they'll get more comfortable with it.
Yeah. So.
Well, are there any words of wisdom or things you'd like to shoot off into the future?
Let me see. I think I've covered all that. Oh, I do my hobbies.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to hear any of that. Pandemic, political. So my hobbies, I like doing a lot of things. I love to cook. I think that's why you and I would often have, because I would enjoy hearing your cooking stories and food and things like that. So I really enjoy cooking and doing gardening work or outside work. I'm not a good gardener, but I just like doing outside work. And music. I love music, and I love musical theater. I love the theater in general.
Do you play any instrument?
I don't. I played piano and didn't really stick with it, but I sang. I was in all-state choir in high school, and there were parts of me that I thought, oh, I wish I could have been exposed more to theater, and I wasn't in a community that really supported that or had that, and I kind of go, well, if I had, I wonder. I've got a nephew who's, he's sung on Broadway, and lives in New York and does all that, and so I live vicariously through him. And but I love still and going back to Hendrix, I think being at Hendrix for 20 years helped me stay connected with current music, and so I like most genres of music and have albums that I still play and all that kind of stuff. But the other big outside thing I do is anything that has to do with water. I'm like maybe a fish in my other life, but I swim on a regular basis for my exercise. And I have a lake house in Hot Springs, so I've got a boat and a Sea-Doo, and anytime I can be out on the water, I still ski, water ski and snow ski. And then in the last 15, 20 years, I've actually picked up scuba diving. So, like I said, anything with water, I do it. So, anytime I'll be scuba diving next month on Costa Rica. So, any chance I can be in the water, under the water, things like that.
Well, that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, both the swimming and the diving are in many ways very spiritual for me. You know, because you swim for 30 minutes and nobody can interrupt you. You got thoughts going. Many times it's thoughts on what do I need to be doing and work wise and all that. But it's, you know, it is very meditative for me, and the diving is even more, because same kind of thing. You're underwater for 45 minutes at a time, and you're with these incredible sea life creatures that, you know, not many people get to see or be that close to. And, you know, you can do it and not be a religious person, but if you're a religious person, just to think of the beauty and they're just so incredibly unique. You know, I went diving last summer with manta rays, and you know they're massive. You know, like 15 feet wide, and I mean, but they're just like these angels are floating. I mean, it's just the coolest thing. So
I took a class with Jay McDaniel called Ecotheology, and you know, kind of talking about how the sacredness and beauty of nature and all of that. Very spiritual. For
Yeah.
a lot of people.
yeah, yeah. And my oldest daughter was with me. My younger daughter doesn't, and my wife aren't into it. But my older daughter, actually, this has become her career. And people say, "How did you grow up in Arkansas?" And she does policy work for Marine. She doesn't do the biology part of it, but she works for Pew Charitable Trust Foundation. And so she and I were diving with these manta rays, and we literally were about 40 feet down, and it was, you know, it was gravelly and rocky, but we just knelt on our knees for 45 minutes while 15, 20 manta rays were just watching them eat and swim. And, you know, a couple of them overestimated and hit me on my head, but I mean, they were that close, you know?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my outside life when I can do it.
Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I can't think of anything else.
Well, like Winston Faulkner used to say, I think you've laid the axe at the root of the tree.
That is true. You've been around him.